Imagine a world where half the population could not vote, work, or even own property. This was the reality for women just a few centuries ago. A time when the fairer sex was confined to the domestic sphere, their voices hushed and their dreams curtailed. The struggle for women's rights was a hard-won battle, fought against a backdrop of deeply ingrained societal norms. But the world has come a long way since then, and it all started with brave women and men who dared to challenge the status quo. The fight for women's rights started in the 18th century during the Age of Enlightenment. This was a period marked by intellectual and philosophical advancements, where society began to question traditional norms and values, and the status of women was no exception. In the heart of this era, we find figures like Mary Wollstonecraft. Born in the mid-18th century, Wollstonecraft was an English writer, philosopher, and advocate of women's rights. Her seminal work, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, written in 1792, is considered one of the earliest and most significant contributions to feminist philosophy. In this groundbreaking piece, Wollstonecraft argues that women are not naturally inferior to men, but appear to be only because they lack education. She suggests that both men and women should be treated as rational beings and imagines a social order founded on reason. Wollstonecraft's ideas were radical for her time, but they laid the groundwork for future generations of activists. But the story of the 18th century fight for women's rights doesn't end with Wollstonecraft. Across the Atlantic, women in the newly formed United States of America were also beginning to question their roles. The American Revolution had stirred up ideas of freedom and equality, leading some women to ask why those principles didn't apply to them. One such woman was Judith Sargent Murray, a writer and advocate for women's rights. Murray penned essays arguing for equal education for women, believing that intellectual equality would lead to greater independence for women in society. Like Wollstonecraft, Murray was ahead of her time, but her ideas left an indelible mark on the fight for women's rights. These women, and many others like them, were the pioneers of the women's rights movement. They dared to challenge the status quo, to question the societal norms that had kept women in subservient roles for centuries. Their courage and determination paved the way for the activists who would follow in their footsteps, sparking a flame that would grow into a raging fire of change. These early seeds of rebellion set the stage for a global movement that would forever change the world. Fast forward to the late 19th and early 20th century, and the world witnessed the rise of the suffragettes. This period marked a significant chapter in the history of women's rights, with a group of strong, determined women stepping onto the world stage. The suffragettes, as they came to be known, were women from all walks of life who shared a common goal: the right to vote. They believed that women, like men, should have a say in the laws and policies that governed their lives. They were ready to fight for this right, and fight they did. The suffragettes movement was not a mere protest, it was a revolution. In Britain, the Women's Social and Political Union, led by Emmeline Pankhurst, was at the forefront of this struggle. They adopted the motto, "Deeds not words," signifying their readiness to act, rather than just talk about their demands. They organized rallies, demonstrations, and even went as far as committing acts of civil disobedience. Across the Atlantic, the American suffragettes were waging their own battle. Activists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton campaigned tirelessly for women's suffrage, leading marches and delivering powerful speeches that rallied women nationwide. The suffragettes faced considerable opposition. They were ridiculed, arrested, and even physically assaulted, but their spirits remained unbroken. They stood firm in their belief that women's right to vote was not a privilege, but a fundamental right. And their efforts were not in vain. Their relentless fight forced the world to take notice. In 1920, the United States ratified the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. Similarly, in 1928, Britain extended the right to vote to all women over the age of 21, acknowledging the validity of the suffragettes' cause. The suffragettes' fight was a turning point in history. It challenged the status quo and paved the way for future generations of women to continue the struggle for equal rights. Their legacy is a testament to the power of collective action and the undeniable truth that change is possible when voices unite for a common cause. The suffragettes' relentless fight led to women gaining the right to vote in many countries, a major victory for women's rights. Their story is a beacon of courage and determination, reminding us all of the power of standing up for what we believe in. The 1960s to 1980s saw the second wave of feminism, where women's rights expanded beyond suffrage. The second wave of feminism was a period marked by a broadening of the feminist agenda. If the first wave was about gaining political rights, the second wave set its sights on the personal, the everyday. It was about breaking down the barriers that society had constructed around gender roles and expectations. This wave of feminism was not just about the right to vote or hold public office. It was about equality in the workplace, reproductive rights, and domestic violence. It was about recognizing that the personal is political, and that women's experiences in their homes, their workplaces, and their relationships were shaped by larger structures of power. At the heart of the second wave was the fight for equality in the workplace. Women demanded equal pay for equal work, and fought against discrimination in hiring and promotion. The second wave saw the passing of landmark legislation, such as the Equal Pay Act in the United States, which made it illegal to pay men and women different wages for the same work. Reproductive rights were another crucial battleground. The second wave fought for access to safe and legal abortion, as well as affordable and accessible contraception. In many ways, the fight for reproductive rights was about more than just healthcare. It was about women's autonomy, their right to control their own bodies and their own lives. The second wave also brought domestic violence into the spotlight, challenging the idea that what happened behind closed doors was a private matter. Feminists argued that domestic violence was a systemic issue, rooted in patriarchal power structures, and called for legal and societal change. The second wave of feminism brought significant changes in laws and societal norms, furthering the cause of women's rights. It challenged and changed the way society thought about gender, power, and equality. As we'll see in the next scene, the fight for women's rights didn't stop there. The third wave would bring its own challenges and victories as women continued to push for equality in all areas of life. From the 1990s onwards, the fight for women's rights has continued to evolve, addressing a variety of issues. The decade saw an increased focus on intersectionality, a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. This concept acknowledges that women's experiences are shaped not only by gender, but also by other factors like race, socioeconomic status, and sexual orientation. As we plunged into the 21st century, the fight for women's rights broadened even further to include the LGBTQ+ community. Societies began to recognize that not all women's experiences are the same, and that the fight for equality must also include those who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. Legal victories, such as the legalization of same-sex marriage in numerous countries, are a testament to this inclusive approach. However, the fight for LGBTQ+ rights is far from over, with battles against discrimination and violence still ongoing. The dawn of the digital age also brought with it new platforms for activism. The #MeToo movement, started by Tarana Burke in 2006, gained worldwide attention in 2017, as women used social media to share their experiences of sexual harassment and assault. This powerful movement has sparked conversations and changes in workplaces and industries across the globe. The fight for equal pay has also remained a critical issue. Despite progress, there is still a significant gender pay gap in many countries. Women, particularly those of color, continue to earn less than their male counterparts. This pay discrepancy is a stark reminder that the fight for women's rights is still very much alive. The modern fight for women's rights is complex and multifaceted, dealing with a wide range of issues from reproductive rights to online harassment. It's a fight that is carried out in courtrooms, on social media, and on the streets. It's a fight that involves not just women, but also their allies, who are committed to achieving equality and justice. Today, the fight for women's rights continues, with women and allies around the world working towards a future of equality and justice. So, what have we learned from this journey through the history of women's rights? Our journey began in the 18th century, a time when the concept of women's rights was merely a whisper, a dream. Amidst the rigid societal norms, brave women began to question their roles, sparking the first flames of the fight for equality. We then moved on to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when the suffragettes emerged. These courageous women, defined by their unyielding spirit, took the fight to the streets, demanding the right to vote. Their tenacity and sacrifice marked a significant milestone in the history of women's rights. Our journey took us next to the second wave of feminism, from the 60s to the 80s. This era saw women challenging more than just political inequalities. They demanded social and cultural changes, breaking barriers in education, employment, reproductive rights, and beyond. Finally, we arrived at the modern fight. From the 90s to the present day, women all over the world continue to strive for equality, addressing issues like wage gap, sexual harassment, and representation in leadership roles. While the world has come a long way in terms of women's rights, the fight is far from over. But as history has shown, progress is possible, and it starts with us.